As we reach the end of the year, I often find myself reflecting on how I've absolutely embarrassed myself over the past year. And sure, I have made a fool of myself many times, but at least I'm not Microsoft in 2013.
Revealing a console is a bit of an art form. After all, it's all about first impressions. You need people not only to want to buy your console, but to go to war for it. Nintendo versus Sega, PlayStation versus Xbox, Nintendo versus your uncle who can't quite figure out how to put on a wrist strap. All battles as old as time, but the last thing you want is for everyone to simply decide that the only fight they actually care about is making fun of your new console relentlessly.
You know, I think this thing is pretty, cool? So, how do you ruin a console reveal? To properly tell this story, we have to go back to May of 2013, just a month before E3 was scheduled to kick off. This was the big year. It was finally time to step into the next generation, and we were all waiting to see what Microsoft had to offer.
And on May 21st, they sure did show us a box with an X on it. Yeah, things didn't go so well. There was no footage of games for the first 30 minutes of an hour-long press conference. Instead, they talked about how the Xbox One would be good for live TV. You know, because the world certainly wasn't changing how we watch TV or anything at the time. When we did finally get to the games, we got almost nothing that was actually, interesting. Some sports games, a little bit of Quantum Break, and lots of Call of Duty Ghosts. The best one. Don't worry though, because a big Halo announcement is on its way too. Is it footage of a next-gen Halo game? No, it's more TV. But don't worry, I am sure this can't possibly go wrong.
So it's pretty safe to say that the initial reveal of the Xbox One went pretty terribly. But don't worry, E3 is right around the corner, and Xbox fans saw this as a perfect opportunity for Microsoft to make things right. E3 2013 was easily Microsoft's worst year at E3 ever. Honestly, I think it's pretty difficult for any other company to go lower than where Microsoft was at that point, and I watched Sony's 2006 press conference.
The stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan. So here's this giant enemy crab.
While Microsoft did actually remember to bring games this time, it was completely overshadowed by literally everything else that happened. The list of stuff that they tried to pull is actually absurd. First up, let's talk about their new policy on used games. Essentially, they no longer exist. Once you put a disc into your console, it links to your account. Permanently. Now, they did try to spin this in a positive way by making it so you no longer need the disc to play the game.
But that's because, in reality, the disc is completely fucking worthless.
You could share it with family accounts, trade it at a participating retailer, whatever that really means, or you could trade it to someone on your friends list for 30 days, one time.
I don't even see the big deal. It's not like I would want to wish experiencing Dead Rising 3 on any of my friends anyway.
But obviously, this would have been awful. The days of going to GameStop with a stack of games that you no longer care about in order to pick up a single brand new game would be over. And forget about trading your console and its library to pick up whatever comes out next, because you'd have to wipe your account from the console, thus wiping away its ability to play the games you would want to trade with it.
But of course you may be wondering, how is Microsoft going to check if a game you put in your console isn't already linked to somebody else's account?
Digital rights management. You see, it was still early days for DRM, really, with games like Diablo 3 and SimCity being the most recent games at the time to be blasted for always online DRM. But how does this apply to the Xbox One?
The console always has to be online, because it does check-ins every 24 hours. And if your console isn't online during check-in time, paperweights for sale.
come and get your paperweight.
Yeah, everything would essentially become unplayable because your Xbox wasn't entirely sure if you actually owned the game that you were trying to play. If only there was some kind of offline, physical way of showing that you owned a video game. The fuck is this? Of course, there was another way to make your shiny new Xbox One into a nice, inactive, decorative piece. And that was to simply unplug the Kinect.
Oh no!
You see, the Kinect was bundled in with every Xbox One, which at first seemed like a nice gesture, until you realize that it drove up the price of the console, and, was required to be plugged in for the console to function. And of course, when the Kinect is plugged in, it's also always on?
Yep, a camera that is constantly on, pointing at best at your living room couch, and, at worst at...
Yeah, understandably, people were not pleased, especially when Microsoft themselves stated that the new Kinect could see in the dark and could extrapolate a person's mood. That's terrifying. Of course, the press conference also had plenty of issues that weren't directly related to the Xbox One. One that I distinctly remember was the Battlefield 4 trailer just not working.
It will happen, I promise.
Imagine being heckled by an E3 audience that's supposed to be mainly journalists and other people in the industry. Like, come on. Of course, 2013 was also the year that the PS4 was revealed, which means that Microsoft had just set up Sony for the home run of a century. At their press conference, which took place after Microsoft's, all Sony had to say was this.
For instance, PlayStation 4 won't impose any new restrictions on the use of PS4 gamers.
Imagine getting a standing ovation for something so basic. It's like Nintendo getting an Oscar for letting people know that the Nintendo Switch has games.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Of course, this also led to what is easily the best tutorial ever uploaded to YouTube.
This is how you share your games on PS4. Thanks.
Sony was going hard, and it was working, with many previously loyal Xbox users saying that they were gonna get a PS4 instead. Suffice it to say, public perception of the Xbox One had hit rock bottom, so that meant that it was time for some damage control. Let's see what former head of Xbox Don Matrix said to try and win back those who now planned on buying PS4s.
And fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't, like it?
Oh god, I'm sorry. What? And yes, in case you're wondering, that all happened at E3 2013, meaning that literally anything else that was going on at E3 got completely overshadowed.
You want a Wii U? You want a Wii U? It's got Pikmin. Pikmin.
Now, of course, if you own an Xbox One, you'll know, none of this stuck. The backlash was way too heavy. In the following months, all of these choices were reversed, and for a very small amount of time, the Xbox One gained the arguably cooler nickname, the Xbox 180. Did all the bad press really have an effect in the long run, though? Did all the Xbox fans that vowed to buy a PS4 actually follow through? Considering Microsoft themselves have admitted that the Xbox One sold less than half of what the PS4 managed, yeah, I think they did. The 360 lost the 7th generation to the PS3, and it still outsold the Xbox One.
Luckily, it does seem that Microsoft has learned their lesson since with the Series X and S. Things do seem to be pretty smooth sailing from here on out after a generation of trailing behind Sony by tens of millions of sales. Genuinely though, it does seem like they've put this all in the past, and it has been smooth sailing for Microsoft ever since. They've had no problems. I'm sure nothing could ever go wrong for them ever again. absolutely no issues presently facing the company. Oh no.